Have you ever looked at your phone, waiting for a message that never came, and wondered if you simply weren't enough? What if the greatest mistake isn't choosing the wrong person, but believing you have to earn someone's certainty? And what if one simple idea, drawn from Elon Musk's public mindset, could change the way you see love forever? For years, millions of people have watched Elon Musk chase goals that most considered impossible. Rockets that could land themselves, electric cars that transformed an industry, companies built while critics predicted failure after failure. Whether people admire him or disagree with him, one thing is difficult to ignore: his willingness to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. But there is a deeper lesson hidden beneath the headlines. Not about technology, not about money, not even about success. It's about the way certainty changes everything. Because in business, Elon has often spoken publicly about committing fully to a mission once he believes it is worth pursuing. That mindset offers an interesting question for relationships. What happens when someone truly chooses you? And what happens when they don't? The answer isn't as obvious as most people think. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why do so many good people spend years trying to convince someone to love them? Imagine walking through an airport filled with thousands of strangers. Every person is carrying invisible baggage. Some are chasing dreams. Some are running from heartbreak. Some are pretending everything is fine while silently wondering why they never feel like they're enough. You can't see their stories, but they're there. The same is true for relationships. Sometimes two people meet at exactly the wrong moment. Sometimes fear disguises itself as independence. Sometimes insecurity wears the mask of confidence. And sometimes, someone keeps you close enough to stay hopeful, but never close enough to feel safe. The truth was far more complicated than anyone expected. Psychologists often describe uncertainty as one of the strongest emotional triggers in human relationships. When affection feels inconsistent, the brain begins searching for explanations. You replay conversations. You analyze text messages. You wonder whether one different sentence might have changed everything. Before long, you're no longer enjoying the relationship. You're trying to solve it. What Elon realized throughout his public career about solving difficult problems offers an interesting contrast. Complex challenges aren't solved by endlessly guessing. They're solved by gathering evidence, testing assumptions, and accepting reality, even when reality isn't what you hoped for. That principle doesn't just apply to engineering. It applies to people. Because evidence matters. If someone consistently shows up, that's evidence. If someone respects your time, that's evidence. If someone communicates honestly, that's evidence. But if you're forced to guess how they feel every single day, that's evidence too. Most people ignore the evidence because they're chasing potential. And potential is one of the most dangerous words in relationships. Because potential lives in imagination. Reality lives in actions. But what happened next changes the entire conversation. Think about every breakthrough in history. Before success became visible, there was uncertainty. There were failures. There were people saying it couldn't be done. Yet eventually, the results spoke louder than opinions. Healthy relationships work in a surprisingly similar way. They don't require constant persuasion. They create consistency. You don't wake up every morning wondering whether gravity still exists. You trust it because it has proven itself. Real love begins creating that same emotional stability. Not perfection, stability. Imagine meeting someone who doesn't leave you wondering whether you're important. Someone who doesn't disappear whenever conversations become uncomfortable. Someone who doesn't reward honesty with silence. At first, that kind of relationship almost feels unfamiliar. Why? Because many people mistake emotional chaos for emotional intensity. They believe butterflies are proof they've found the right person. But sometimes butterflies are simply anxiety wearing a beautiful disguise. And that's where everything starts changing. Elon Musk has publicly spoken many times about first principles thinking. Breaking complicated problems down to their fundamental truths instead of relying on assumptions. Now imagine applying first principles to your own heart. Strip away the excuses. Strip away wishful thinking. Strip away fear. What's left? One simple question. Does this person consistently make me feel secure, or consistently make me question my worth? That answer can reveal more than months of overthinking. Yet most people never ask it. Instead, they ask different questions. What if they're just busy? What if they're afraid? What if they change? Those questions keep hope alive, but they also keep pain alive. The truth isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it arrives on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when you realize you've spent 6 months waiting for someone to become who they promised they would be. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive with an argument. It arrives with exhaustion, and that's when something remarkable begins to happen. Instead of chasing answers, you begin chasing peace. But peace feels unfamiliar when you've spent years chasing uncertainty. That's why so many people accidentally return to relationships that hurt them. Not because they're weak, because familiarity is comforting, even when it causes pain. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. The greatest breakthroughs don't happen and nothing. By repeating the same experiment over and over while expecting different results. They happen when you're willing to challenge the assumptions behind the experiment itself. What if the relationship isn't failing because you're not enough? What if it's failing because it was never built on mutual certainty? That possibility changes everything. Because now the question isn't, how do I make them love me? The question becomes, why am I trying to earn what should be freely given? Take a moment and think about someone who genuinely values you. Maybe it's a close friend, a family member, a mentor. Notice something. You rarely question whether they care. Their actions answer the question before your mind has to ask it. Healthy love follows the same pattern. Not every day will be perfect. Disagreements will happen. Life will become complicated. But respect doesn't disappear. Effort doesn't vanish. Communication doesn't become a guessing game. The mystery isn't whether conflict exists. The mystery is how two people respond when conflict arrives. And that mystery leads to something even deeper. Because the person meant for you won't make you doubt your value every single day. They'll remind you, through consistent actions rather than perfect words, that your presence matters. But one surprising realization still remained. What if the biggest obstacle to finding that kind of relationship isn't other people? What if it's the story you've been telling yourself all along? Because in the next chapter, we'll uncover the invisible belief that quietly keeps millions of people trapped in relationships, built on uncertainty, and why recognizing it could completely transform the future of your love life. But what happened next shocked everyone. What if the greatest obstacle standing between you and the relationship you deserve isn't another person at all? What if it's a belief you've carried for so long that it now feels like the truth? And what Elon Musk's public approach to failure and resilience suggests is that the hardest problems are rarely solved by looking outward first. They are solved by asking a better question. In the last chapter, we uncovered a powerful idea. The right person doesn't make you spend every day wondering where you stand. Instead, they create trust through consistent actions. But if that sounds so simple, why do so many intelligent, caring people stay trapped in relationships filled with uncertainty? The answer begins much earlier than most people realize. Long before the first text message, long before the first date, long before two people even meet. The truth was far more complicated than anyone expected. Every person carries an invisible blueprint. It's made from childhood experiences, past relationships, disappointments, victories, and quiet moments no one else ever sees. That blueprint becomes the lens through which we interpret love. If someone once made you feel invisible, you may begin believing that attention must be earned. If someone constantly pulled away, you may mistake emotional distance for mystery. If affection was inconsistent, inconsistency can begin to feel strangely familiar. And familiarity has incredible power. It quietly convinces us that what feels normal must also be healthy. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why do people fight so hard for relationships that leave them emotionally exhausted? Psychologists often describe something called intermittent reinforcement. When affection comes unpredictably, the brain can become even more attached because it keeps hoping the next moment of closeness is just around the corner. One loving message, then silence. One unforgettable weekend, then emotional distance. One promise, then another excuse. Without realizing it, the relationship begins to resemble a game of chance. You're no longer building a future, you're waiting for another emotional reward. And waiting slowly becomes a lifestyle. But what happened next shocked everyone. Imagine watching one of Elon Musk's companies face public criticism after a failed launch or a difficult setback. His public comments have often emphasized learning from mistakes instead of pretending they never happened. Whether those lessons came from engineering, manufacturing, or leadership, the pattern remained remarkably consistent. Reality always wins. Ignoring facts doesn't change outcomes. That same principle applies to relationships. If someone repeatedly shows you that they avoid commitment, believe the pattern. If they repeatedly disappear whenever conversations become meaningful, notice the pattern. If respect appears only when they're afraid of losing you, notice that pattern too. Patterns tell stories that words often hide, and that's where many people become stuck. Because hope is powerful. Hope whispers, maybe next week will be different. Hope says, they're under stress. Hope says, if I become more patient, more understanding, more supportive, everything will finally change. Hope itself isn't the problem. Hope without evidence is. What Elon realized through pursuing difficult goals was that optimism works best when it paired with honest observation. Dream big, but measure reality. Believe in possibilities, but don't ignore facts. The same balance protects the heart. Think about someone building a bridge. No engineer would ignore cracks simply because they believe the bridge has potential. They inspect it, they strengthen it, or they accept that it isn't safe. Relationships deserve the same honesty. Because emotional cracks don't disappear simply because we refuse to look at them. Sometimes they grow quietly until trust can no longer support the weight placed upon it. The truth was never about perfection. It was always about consistency. Here's something few people talk about. Confidence doesn't begin when someone chooses you. Confidence begins when you stop allowing another person's uncertainty to define your value. That realization changes everything. Imagine waking up one morning without checking whether someone has replied. Imagine making plans without wondering if they'll cancel again. Imagine laughing with friends without secretly hoping your phone lights up. Imagine experiencing peace instead of constant anticipation. At first, that almost sounds impossible. But that's because emotional peace feels unfamiliar after long periods of emotional instability. Your nervous system adjusts to chaos. Silence begins feeling suspicious. Consistency begins feeling boring. Kindness feels almost unbelievable. And that's one of the greatest relationship paradoxes. Healthy love often arrives quietly. It doesn't always create fireworks. It creates safety. Yet safety is exactly what many wounded hearts have forgotten how to recognize. But one mystery still remained. Why do some people leave healthy relationships searching for excitement, while others remain trapped in unhealthy ones searching for certainty? The answer lies in identity. If deep down you believe you must prove your worth, you'll naturally be attracted to situations where worth constantly feels uncertain. Not because you enjoy pain, because your mind mistakes struggle for purpose. Every small sign of affection feels like confirmation that you're finally succeeding. But love isn't supposed to feel like passing an exam every week. It isn't supposed to feel like earning points. Real connection isn't built on constant performance. It's built on mutual acceptance. This is where Elon Musk's a public philosophy about first principles becomes surprisingly useful again. Remove every assumption. Forget the romantic movies. Forget the dramatic stories. Forget what social media tells you relationships should look like. Ask yourself one simple question. If I met this person today, knowing exactly how they treat me now, would I still choose this relationship? Pause for a moment. Answer honestly, because that answer often reveals the truth your emotions have been trying to avoid. Sometimes we stay in relationships because we're attached to memories rather than reality. We remember who someone was during the first month. We remember promises, potential, dreams, future vacations, late-night conversations. But relationships don't survive on yesterday. They survive on today's choices, every single day. And that's where emotional transformation begins. Not when someone else suddenly changes, but when you stop negotiating with reality. When you stop confusing attention with commitment. When you stop accepting inconsistency as proof of passion. When you begin believing that your peace has value. That shift may seem small, but it changes every decision that follows. Because once you know your worth, uncertainty stops looking romantic. It starts looking expensive. Expensive to your confidence. Expensive to your happiness. Expensive to the future you're trying to build. But what Elon realized at that moment changed everything. The biggest breakthroughs don't happen because circumstances become perfect. They happen because people become courageous enough to act on the truth they've been avoiding. And one final question still remained unanswered. If recognizing your worth is the first step, what does it actually look like when two emotionally healthy people build a relationship together? The answer may surprise you, because in the next chapter, we'll uncover the quiet habits that separate relationships built on lasting trust from those built on temporary emotion, and why the smallest behaviors often reveal the biggest truths long before anyone says, I love you. What if the strongest relationships are not built on grand romantic gestures, but on the quiet decisions two people make every single day? And what if the signs you've been searching for have been there all along, hidden in ordinary moments that most people overlook? As we continue this journey, inspired by Elon Musk's publicly known mindset of solving problems from first principles, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The smallest patterns often reveal the biggest answers. In the last chapter, we discovered that peace should never be mistaken for boredom, and that consistency is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity. But another mystery remained. If the right relationship feels secure, why do so many people overlook it while chasing relationships that constantly leave them questioning themselves? The truth was far more complicated than anyone imagined. Human beings are natural storytellers. Every experience becomes a story. Every disappointment creates another chapter. Every heartbreak quietly rewrites the way we expect the future to unfold. Without realizing it, many people stop seeing others for who they are. Instead, they see them through the lens of old wounds. Someone takes a few hours to reply. Immediately, the mind begins writing a familiar story. They're losing interest. They're pulling away. I've done something wrong. But reality may be entirely different. This is why emotional awareness matters so much. Not every fear is a fact. Not every thought deserves to be believed. And not every silence carries rejection. Yet one question remained unanswered. How do emotionally healthy people separate fear from reality? The answer begins with observation instead of assumption. Imagine watching a rocket launch. Every decision is based on data. Every adjustment is based on evidence. Every setback becomes information rather than proof of failure. That same mindset can transform relationships. Instead of asking, what if they leave? Ask, what evidence do I actually have? Instead of asking, am I enough? Ask, are we both investing in this relationship? Instead of wondering whether you're lovable, wonder whether the relationship is healthy. That subtle shift changes everything, because healthy love is never a one-person project. It requires two people moving toward each other, not one constantly chasing while the other constantly retreats. But what happened next shocked everyone. Many people believe trust is created by words. I'll always be here. I'll never hurt you. You can count on me. Beautiful promises, meaningful promises. But promises alone cannot build trust. Trust grows through repetition. It grows when actions quietly confirm what words have already spoken. Think about the people you trust most. Why do you trust them? Probably not because of one unforgettable conversation. You trust them because they have consistently shown up, again, and again, and again. Consistency is what transforms hope into confidence. This is one of the most powerful lessons we can draw from Elon Musk's public career. Whether launching new technologies or leading ambitious projects, long-term progress has depended on persistent execution rather than a single dramatic moment. Relationships work in much the same way. Love is less about one perfect day. It's more about hundreds of ordinary days. Checking in, listening, keeping promises, choosing kindness during disagreement, respecting each other's dreams, showing up when life becomes difficult. Those quiet moments rarely go viral, but they build something stronger than excitement. They build trust. The truth was never hidden in dramatic declarations. It was hidden in daily habits. Imagine two couples. The first constantly posts perfect pictures. Everything looks effortless. Everything appears exciting. Yet behind closed doors, they avoid difficult conversations. Small resentments quietly grow. Misunderstandings remain unresolved. The second couple rarely attracts attention. Their life appears ordinary. They communicate honestly. They apologize without keeping score. They celebrate each other's victories. They face challenges together instead of against each other. From the outside, one relationship looks more impressive. From the inside, the other is far stronger. Appearances can be incredibly persuasive. Reality is what lasts. Yet another mystery still remained. Why do people ignore obvious warning signs? Sometimes, it's because walking away feels like admitting failure. Sometimes, it's because they've already invested years. Sometimes it's because they're afraid no one else will choose them. Fear has an incredible ability to make unhealthy situations feel permanent. But fear is a poor decision maker. It asks, what if I'm alone forever? Growth asks, what kind of future am I building if nothing changes? That question is uncomfortable, but it is also freeing, because it shifts your attention away from temporary emotions and toward long-term fulfillment. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. The future isn't created by wishing, it's created by decisions. Every meaningful achievement begins with a choice to stop accepting limits that no longer make sense. The same principle applies to relationships. You don't create a healthy future by endlessly waiting for someone else to become a different person. You create it by becoming someone who values honesty, respect, and emotional stability. That transformation begins within. Picture yourself 1 year from now. How do you want to feel when your phone rings? Calm, secure, excited, or anxious? How do you want disagreements to end? With silence or understanding? How do you want to describe your relationship? Complicated or peaceful? Your answers reveal something important. They reveal the life you're truly searching for. And once you recognize that vision, your standards naturally begin to change. You stop confusing attention with affection. You stop mistaking unpredictability for passion. You stop believing that love must constantly be difficult to be meaningful. Instead, you begin appreciating something far more valuable: emotional safety, mutual respect, shared effort, quiet confidence. The relationship becomes a place where both people grow rather than compete, where success is celebrated instead of resented, where vulnerability is welcomed instead of punished. That doesn't mean challenges disappear. Every meaningful relationship faces obstacles. Misunderstandings happen. Stress appears. Life becomes unpredictable. But emotionally healthy partners don't see conflict as proof that love is ending. They see it as an opportunity to understand each other more deeply. That difference changes the entire relationship. The truth was far more hopeful than most people expected. The person meant for you will not remove every challenge from your life. They will not always know the perfect words. They will not always make flawless decisions. But they won't leave you constantly questioning your value. Their consistency will answer questions before insecurity has the chance to create them. And perhaps that's the greatest difference of all. Because certainty isn't created through perfection. It's created through trust, earned over time. But one final question remained unanswered. Once you've learned to recognize healthy love, once you've stopped chasing uncertainty, Once you've rebuilt your confidence, how do you carry these lessons into every part of your life, not just your relationships? The answer leads to the most important revelation of this entire journey, because in the final chapter, we'll discover why the way you value yourself shapes every relationship you'll ever have, explore the lasting mindset lessons inspired by Elon Musk's public approach to resilience and purpose, and uncover the life-changing truth that has been quietly waiting beneath the surface all along. What if everything you've been searching for in another person has actually been pointing you back to yourself? What if the relationship that changes your life doesn't begin with finding someone new, but with refusing to abandon your own worth ever again? And what Elon Musk's publicly known mindset teaches us is that every extraordinary outcome begins with one decision: to build on a strong foundation instead of chasing quick results. Let's take one final look at the journey. We began with a simple but powerful question: why do so many people doubt themselves in relationships? Then we discovered that uncertainty is not the same as love. Consistency, respect, and honest communication are far stronger indicators of genuine connection than dramatic highs and painful lows. We explored how old experiences shape the stories we tell ourselves, and how those stories can quietly influence every relationship we enter. Finally, we uncovered that healthy love isn't seamers. It is built on perfect moments. It is built on repeated acts of trust, kindness, and mutual effort. But one question still remained: how do you carry these lessons into the rest of your life? The truth was far more profound than it first appeared. Elon Musk has often spoken publicly about thinking from first principles, breaking complicated problems down to their most fundamental truths, instead of accepting assumptions. While this idea is usually applied to engineering and innovation, it offers a meaningful perspective for personal growth as well. Imagine applying that same approach